Hello and welcome to everyone to this episode of Wrong Ones with Weston. Uh, Clearly, there's been some delay from our end and some lag from our end. I'd apologize to all those who've been waiting in the comments, to start at 7. It's primarily due to me, but I'm very sorry. Hopefully, the show's good enough for you guys to make up for a 20-minute delay. And I promise you guys that it's not going to happen again. And on that note, I'd welcome the two in-house guests. Quite regular feature of this, quite regular features of this show. Uh, Dan Weston, who you've seen a lot of times over here, and some have even given him the title of cricket.com's Matthew Hayden, though we'd still believe that we'd like him to be Dan Weston. And then there is Somesh Agarwal, who some of you like to sometimes call as Benny Deol, the Bollywood singer. But anyway, today it's not about Matthew Hayden, it's not about Bollywood music. It's about discussing two teams from the Indian T20 League. This is the third episode that we are doing in this series. We have already talked about four teams: uh, Bangalore, Punjab, Hyderabad, and Rajasthan. If you are a fan of four of these teams, you can go and watch our videos on these two teams and what are the possible 11s for these teams, who could be their impact players, and are they potential top four teams or not. But before you do that, might as well watch the show today, because you also need to know about how strong or weak the opponents are. On So today we are going to discuss about we're going to start discussing with the team whose captain got famous by saying strike rates are overrated. uh, so you probably know which player I'm talking about and which team I'm talking about. So guys, I want to know from both of you, are strike rates really overrated?
I think you're going to know the answer that I'm going to give you for that, Gurkirat. I'll certainly, they are not overrated. We know that there's a huge correlation between strike rate and boundary percentage, and if you're a below average boundary hitter, it's basically impossible for you to strike at over 140 strike rate. And we also know that around 85% of matches in the IPL or any in the Indian Premier in the league or any T20 league, Big Bash, 100, Blast, etc. All about 85% of matches are won by the team with the highest boundary percentage in the match. So it's clear that strike rates do matter. It's clear that boundary percentage does matter. So I think Rahul has now tripled down on his statements. So it'll be really interesting to see how he approaches this coming season.
Somesh?
Yeah, I mean, strike rates are as overrated as actually winning the game. Or winning the title, I must say, not just the game.
uh, do you guys think that Lucknow have strengthened their squad from the last tournament? Do you think they've done some positive reinforcements in the auction, or do you think they are pretty much the same squad that they were last time?
It looks like they're going to structure up, I think, pretty similarly. Obviously, they've brought in Nicholas Paran, which is if we get the good Paran, that's certainly a bonus. But they spent a lot of money on him. They looks like they're going to lose Mohsin Khan for most of the season with injury. So that's the problem that they're going to need to overcome. What I don't like is that I still feel like there's this like top five, and then the batting really stops. Krunal has not had high strike rates for a number of years with the bat, and looks like he would slot in at probably 6. And then there's no real domestic pace all rounder that you can really fit in as a success 7, apart from Prarat Mankad. And then you've got kind of potentially 4 number 10s or number 11s. So for me, that's a slight issue. Maybe they're going to structure up differently. One way they could do that would be to lose, say, a Mark Wood from the starting 11 and bring in someone like Daniel Sams instead. But then you lose on bowling quality, as Sams' numbers with the ball are not great. So yeah, there's some decisions that they're going to have to make, I think.
So I mean, in my opinion, Puran's addition is definitely a very big plus because he's definitely not a player who feels strike rate is overrated, and his presence, him being a left-hander, a spin basher, would provide impetus to their batting lineup. However, last season one of the biggest concerns for Lucknow were the death bowling. They were, on paper, they were the worst death bowling side on bowling economy, and what they've done is essentially fired everyone overseas involved for that. They don't have Chamira, they don't have Jason Holder. I mean, even Jason Holder was not primarily a death bowler, but was pretty much used at that front. Now, I'm not sure they've done enough to plug that. Uh, they've bought in Naveen ul Haq, but it will be very difficult to make a choice between him and Wood if they want to sort that out. And given now Mohsin is primarily out, and Avesh Khan struggled in the last IPL and has been struggling for India as well since, that still remains a gap. Unless, of course, they structure the side very differently. To that, I have one opinion, and I would discuss with what I think with you guys in due course.
I agree. That's the key situation is how that deployment of the non-batting overseas, if you like, because I think that the De Kock, and Puran, and Stoinis are probably going to be mainstays of this squad. So there's a lot of players kind of competing for that fourth overseas berth. I think Naveen shores up the death bowling a lot more than Mark Wood would. However, Wood obviously has a higher reputation and a higher price tag as well, so that tends to influence decision makers. And then you would have a Sams or a Shepherd if you wanted to compromise a bit with your bowling and have some more batting.
Yep. Gurkirat, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yes, so I feel that their 11, like Dan said, is more or less structured around the same lines how it was last time with the number of all rounders. I like the top five looks good in terms of covering all the areas possible. There's a possible left hand right hand combination that they can keep with KL and QDK opening. Then Hooda one down if probably KL gets dismissed. It could be Pooran if QDK gets dismissed. So those are your three or four. Then at five you have Shriners. I'd like to see someone like Prerak Mankad in the 11 instead of an Ayush Badoni, because I feel that for a number 6 or a number 7 spot, he's a better batter than what Ayush Badoni is. Also more experienced with Kunal Pandey at 7. And then, you have your four bowlers in Avesh, Bishnoi, Mark Wood, and there's one other player who I noted down.
Nutcut.
Yeah, In absence of
Nutcut.
Mohsin, it would be
Ah,
Unarkat. If there is no Mohsin, to me it was surprising that they also bought someone like Amit Mishra, and they have Shabaz Nadeem as well in the spin bowling attack. I'd like to see someone like Bishnoi to be allowed to bowl the way he knows best. My biggest fear with that franchise is that Bishnoi will probably become someone a traditional leggy instead of trying to be a Rashid Khan, because Bishnoi naturally has that pace and the faster trajectory. He had Puran in a lot of trouble when West Indies were touring India last year around, and he was also dropped. Bishnoi was also dropped by Lucknow for a few games. So I'd like to see that happen. And I think in the absence of Mohsin, at least for the first few games, Avesh Khan has a much bigger role to play now. And this IPL is also important for Avesh Khan because you see a lot of Indian bowlers who are injured. There's Mukesh Chaudhary who's injured, Mohsin Khan is injured, Bumrah's not there, Prasidh Krishna's out. So there is an opportunity to be taken by any domestic Indian pacer to try and make it to if not to the Indian team directly, then just be around be around there. That when the opportunity presents itself, you can be at least in the 15, if not in the 11. So that is what I see. And when it comes to impact players, there's someone like Yash Thakur who they bought, who I think can be a good player. He's just looking at his numbers over here. He got 15 wickets at an average of 15.86 in the last Syed Mushtaq tournament. So there's that. And there's Manan Vora, there's Ayush Badoni. So there are players who can who they can try as good fits in an impact player situation.
Hmm. Yep, I think to just detail out our discussion further, maybe we can go to Dan's 11 and take some thoughts from them.
Sure.
Yep, Dan, over to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and this is certainly not clear cut. As I said earlier, I think that discussion around Mark Wood's spot is probably the one big debating point for this squad. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if Daniel Sams played ahead of him. So Andy Flower, the coach, has Daniel Sams at Trent Rockets in England in the 100. So he's obviously a big fan of Daniel Sams, and I think that could easily be a swap there. But yeah, it's quite difficult to predict. I do fear for the death bowling a little bit. Obviously, we've touched on that point already about their numbers last season at the death. I certainly don't think that on paper they've done much to change that this year. So that's going to be a challenge, especially if Sam's plays, because his numbers at the death are pretty expensive generally. So yeah, I think the top five kind of are going to pick themselves. Top six are going to pick themselves. Krunal, you can debate whether he bats ahead or behind Preet Mankad, who I wanted to see. I want to see how he gets on at this level, because I think that he was unlucky not to play more last year at Punjab. So that's exciting for me as well, because I think that he's a player who probably could break through. I would say he's a breakthrough player, but at an older age, if you like. Impact players, there's plenty. As you say, Vora could easily swap with Badoni as the batter. Kay Gautam, I think, could be a really interesting impact player, given that super high intent that he has. Mishra provides more of the conventional spin option, turning the ball away from the right-hander. And Yash Thakur, as I think Gurkirat mentioned earlier, 15 wickets for Vidarbha last season domestically, outbowled Umesh Yadav, for example, and in the same team, and looks like a interesting player to follow, I think, for this tournament as well. I think he's 24 years old.
Yeah. So one question: both of you are pretty big on Prerak Mankad instead of someone like Ayush Badoni, who has played in the last season and did decently well, started well. Maybe it fizzled out a little later, but I think Lucknow was still in the process of identifying the correct spot for him. Any particular reason, Dan? We've already heard from Gurkirat, but from you, of choosing Mankad over Badoni?
Yeah, for me, it's simply the bowling option that he provides as well, and also kind of a bit of what I think they might do in terms of, you look at Andy Flower's squads around the world, and they often have a lot of all-rounders in there, and you can see that here. You've got Huda, you've got Stoinis, you've got Krunal, you could have Mankad, you could easily have Daniel Sams in this team as well. So there's 4 or 5 all-rounder options here that I think are really potential starters for this. You'd also have someone like Kyle Mayers as well, who offers that coming as an overseas player as well. So look, there's a lot of options there. I think that's kind of how they're going to structure up, based on how the head coach likes to organise his starting 11s generally.
So yeah, next up, just have one question about the elephant in the room. Last season, Lucknow did not have really great numbers in the power play. KL Rahul's strike rate was 103 in the power play. And now, Dan, since you've pointed out that this team is essentially a top 5 team and then batting sort of fizzles out, even though, I mean, people largely see Lucknow as a team full of all-rounders, but do you think having a lineup with just 5 batters will again make Rahul go into his shell and think about playing the innings? Because while they had the lowest scoring power play, they were the best side in the death overs, and that was not because of essentially lower order hitters. Their best 2 death hitters were actually KL Rahul and Quinton de Kock, when they were able to sort of survive till that point of time. Yeah.
Look, I think that there's definitely scope to critique KL Rahul's methodology for sure. I think we've already kind of touched on that, and I'm pretty strong on the fact that oftentimes chewing up a lot of balls to start with and looking to catch up is an extremely high risk strategy, and often more higher risk than actually being having more intent earlier. But you're right. This structure with potentially the batting really severely tailing off after number 5 could well put him back into that shell again. Certainly, I think when we discussed Punjab on one of the previous shows, we spoke about the years when they had Majib or Chris Jordan at number 7, and you could that's probably a big part of the rationale as to why KL Rahul played like that a lot of the time previously as well. So yeah, I mean, and this is always the kind of perennial debate about a number 7 or a number 8 in T20 cricket, is that yes, they don't face that many balls a lot of the time. The average balls faced per match is low. However, their presence in the squad as or the starting 11, I should say, as a viable batting option to add that depth kind of gives the top order more of a license to go harder, knowing that there's backup if it all goes wrong.
But shouldn't impact player change that? Because essentially they can have an extra batter.
Yeah, absolutely, and that could do. But the problem is that, and this is why I'm a bit more minded towards, like I say, K Gautam in that role, is because I want a high intent player. Because if you've got a KL Rahul who's going to often chew up balls to start with, that's key. We need to have a structure up a group that can catch up for him, if you like. Say he's 30 or 30 and gets out, the rest of the team have got to catch up. So having those high strike rate impact players makes sense to me.
For me, there are two things over here. One is about why I am preferring someone like a Prerak Mankad over Ayush Badoni. One is obviously he also has a very good intent. He so far in T20s he has a strike rate of 140 plus and at a decent average of 30. So it's not that he's just giving you high strike rate but not giving you runs. He's also giving you runs. And the last tournament, the Syed Mushtaq Ali tournament that happened in the quarterfinal, he had a very good innings coming in at number 6 or number 7 versus Mumbai, where he scored 60 odd and 22 runs. Now, also, it's not just about those 60 runs. Why I like him is because of the areas that he was able to access towards the grounds. He has some very good shots behind the wicket. He's someone who can maneuver the field, playing the laps, opening up the face of the bat to bisect the point fielder and the third man fielder inside the circle. So these are the few things that I liked about him. And like you mentioned, Somesh, about the impact player coming in. And if Unadkat's a part of the 11, Unadkat is also not someone who can't hold the bat. So you may not have proper batters who can who are averaging more than 35 or something at 5, 6, 7. But I still believe that Prerak Mankad, Kunal Pandya, Unadkat, and then one of whosoever is the impact player, if it's a batter, I think it gives you enough batting depth to go hard. And when you are chasing, I think it's still more or less easier to pace the innings and still be able to take your time. It's where when you're batting first that the problem really starts to come, as to how much do you want to score, and what is probably and understanding what is probably the par score. So I think that is where the problem comes. And uh, given now that KL Rahul has lost his spot in the T20 setup as well, I don't think there's a better time for him to just resort back to being the KL Rahul of 2018 and the years before. I think the second coming of someone like KL Rahul in T20s cannot come at a better time than this tournament now.
Can I ask you, in your opinion, in this situation with KL Rahul? Look, I agree with you completely. There is no better time for him to come out and have an outstanding season. But in his head, what is a successful season for him? Is it scoring 400 runs at a strike rate of 150, which I would suggest is a pretty decent season. He's looking to probably average like very high 20s at a strike rate of 150. I think that's a very impactful season. Or is it scoring a load of runs, not worrying about the strike rate, but picking up the orange cap?
For me, given that you are an opener and you're going to play 14 games, an average of somewhere between 33 to 35 should be the one that you're looking at, which probably brings you to around a total of 450 to maybe 480 runs, somewhere in between. And a strike rate of 140 should be the minimum that KL Rahul should be having. Because again, strike rate of 140 is not something very difficult. It's about going at a run rate of what, 8.4. It translates to going at a run rate of 8.4. And if you are batting in the power play and if you are able to average 33, 34, for a player of KL Rahul's quality, that should happen without him breaking a sweat.
Agree.
I'm not even saying that okay, he has to have a strike rate of 150 while going at an average of 33, 34. I'm just saying you aim for 140, because with KL Rahul, if he's aiming for a season where he's averaging 33, 34 at a strike rate of 140, he'll be able to give you a strike rate of 140 and probably even a higher average of say around 35, 36, because he's not someone who, despite going at a good rate, takes a lot of risks, because he has a lot of shots. He has the conventional strokes, which a lot of batters don't have. So he doesn't have to manufacture a lot of shots once his eye is in. So I just hope that in his head it's clear that it's not really the volume of runs that is going to win his team the games. It is the pace at which those runs are going to come in and the impact that those runs should bring in, which can help him earn back a place in the T20 team.
And I'm pretty sure an orange cap with a strike rate of 125 won't make him earn his India spot back.
Yeah, I don't think it's happening.
Yeah. Okay. So there are a few unknown commodity as well in Lucknow's squad. I mean, people like Swapnil Singh. Dan, do you have any analysis or any thoughts on those guys?
Well, we've spoken about Yash Thakur already as someone who potentially could make an impact on this Lucknow team, either as an impact player or as a domestic pacer. Swapnil Singh is actually now 32 years of age, and the issue I think for him is that where do you bat him, because he's not really a hitter. Low boundary percentage in his career, 13-14%, and in List A cricket, a low strike rate of 80, just over 80 as well. So he's almost like a Krunal Pandya light, if you like, in terms of like bowling slow left arm orthodox and not really showing that there's that much hitting in the locker. So for me, I look at him as someone who's just like a kind of a backup for Krunal. We've always spoken about K. Gautam as well as someone who even at sort of veteran age is someone who can just come in and tee off and bowl a bit of match-up spin potentially as well. Badoni, Manan Vora, batting options as well.
There's Karan Sharma as well.
Yeah. And Karan Sharma as well, who can bowl off spin and bat too. So there's a few options here. Perhaps a lot of kind of filler or unproven players in domestically in this squad as backup options. So that's going to be really interesting to see how they use those impact players wisely. And I'm sure that I personally I rate Andy Flower really highly as a coach and as a tactician. So I would like to think that from the outset, Lucknow will be a team that have done their research with impact players perhaps more than others.
One player that we've not touched upon, and I really want to know your thoughts, that is Romario Shepherd. I mean, what do you think? Is he a batting all-rounder or is he a bowling all-rounder? Because I failed to actually categorize him in either of the category. Where does he actually fall?
Yeah, and that's such a good question. And you know what? You could say the same about someone like Odin Smith as well.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult to categorize them. Look, the first time I really saw a lot of Romario Shepherd was towards the end of 2021 when he played in T10, and I watched him play at Sheikh Zayed Stadium a lot live, and I found him to be a really exciting, high ceiling player. but he hasn't really shown it consistently enough. Batting wise, I think he's more conventional than an Odin Smith in terms of Odin will be more brute force and power, whereas Romario Shepherd's got more cricket shots, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, you could say that eventually he could be some form of batting all rounder. But numbers wise with the ball, he's really kind of struggled over the last year or so. Which, again, this is a similar thing with Daniel Sams as well. Is that if you do pick them over a Mark Wood or a Naveen or Hack, you probably do lose something with the ball, but you gain something with the bat. And this is the trade off that I think is going to be quite tricky for Lucknow to find.
So do you think Romario Shepherd is more of a backup for Marcus Stoinis, maybe?
I don't think so. I don't think he's been brought in to bat in the top five. I think he's more of a competition with Daniel Sams type player at this point in time. But as a package, like the skills that he has, the talent that he has, he could be anything. So it's just harnessing that and giving him clear game plans. I think would be a key for him too.
I've personally felt that he's become better as a batter, and his bowling has probably gone down. I mean, he has an economy rate of 10.5 in T20 internationals and 9 plus in T20s. If I don't know if it makes sense, but he's he would be better suited to be a number 7 rather than number 8, wherein you can come in and bowl 2 overs, but to rely on him to bowl 4 overs is something very difficult. I think players like Pat Cummins, players like Shardul Thakur and Romario Shepherd, they are of a similar mold. They've come into the T20 setup as more of a bowlers, but their batting has started to make more impact because of the shots that they have. And I've believed this for some time that even Shardul Thakur has a better shot to become a batting all-rounder in T20s rather than become a bowling all-rounder because of the lack of control that he has sometimes in white ball. Even Pat Cummins, I mean, especially the way Pat Cummins was batting in the last season, it would have been much better for him to probably take up that role of a batting all-rounder rather than a bowling all-rounder. And I suppose Mario Shepherd lies somewhere in between that. Anyway, a question to both of you: who's that one player who you think, if they, if that player is injured, that they could really struggle to make it to the playoffs or struggle to have a very good season?
For me, I would go with Avesh Khan because the domestic bowling looks so light without him now that they've lost probably mostly Khan for most of the tournament, if not all of the tournament. So that for me, I think is a critical. He's a critical part of this bowling group now. But I think you could also say not in terms of injury, but a key for them will be KL Rahul to have a positive impact season. That is so critical. We spoke earlier about 35 average, 140 plus strike rate. For me, I would say that that's the minimum expectation we should expect for someone of his talent. What I don't want to see is 650 runs at a strike rate of 120 just to win the orange cap, and that would, I think, negatively contribute to Lucknow's chances.
I think for me, Lucknow was the toughest to actually pick that one player. I was contemplating between two players, Puran and Krunal. Puran because he was bought for solving a very particular, not an issue, but actually the balance the side well and give some company to KL Rahul and others, because it was essentially a team of full of all-rounders. But I think Krunal is also very essential for the side because he provides that matchup spinner option as well, and he's a left-hander. I feel whose batting is often underused. So if I have to pick one, maybe it's Krunal. But again, Lucknow the toughest team to pick in terms of who's the impact player.
For me, I tend to agree with somewhere with Somesh. Uh, if someone like Puran doesn't have a good season, the consequence of that could be KL Rahul resorting to anchoring. So to avoid KL Rahul to anchor, it is very, very important that someone like a Nicholas Puran has a good season. Because Nicholas Puran, if he has a good season, he can also sort of make sometimes make up for Deepak Hooda not doing well with the bat, and then allow that cushion for Marcus Stoinis to come in at the right time. Last season, what also happened a lot with Lucknow was that it wasn't fixed at what point of time would Marcus Stoinis bat. I think he only played 100 balls, and probably in 8 games, or out of the 11 innings that he batted, in 8 innings he was coming after the 15th over, which wasn't ideal either. So I suppose Nicholas Puran having a good season is very important for them, because then it keeps the entire batting order together, and it makes sure that someone like a KL Rahul isn't anchoring, someone like Marcus Stoinis isn't left to do all the heavy lifting. So I would go for Nicholas Puran as the player that they can't really afford to have a bad season.
Hmm. Yeah. So before we wrap up Lucknow, I made a point earlier in the show that I'll have a left field question for both of you. Now, I'm pretty sure that this is not going to happen at the start of the season. But let's say if Nicholas Puran has a decent run and plays well, is there a potential to actually not play Quinton de Kock in the 11, slot in any Indian opener, or maybe even go the leftist field way and have Krunal Pandya opening with KL Rahul to have that left-right matchup and play both Naveen and Wood to solve that death over issue? Because if I'm Lucknow, I'm more worried about the bowling rather than the batting, because there are quite a few match winners in the batting department. However, Avesh Khan's form has been very iffy. Markwood is injury prone. There is no Mohsin Khan. So essentially, I would rather have the overseas player doing the job, which is more nuanced and more specific. And at this point of time, I know saying something like not play Quinton de Kock might almost be laughable given what he did to West Indies the other day. But your thoughts?
I don't think it's laughable. I actually I know where you're coming from, and I think that it's certainly if you're looking at kind of deviation to the mean between De Kock and the average opener, and an overseas bowler, and compared to the average bowler, that would help the Lucknow team. However, I just don't see it happening. But that doesn't
Yeah.
mean it's a stupid idea. It just means that I just think that the thought wouldn't even cross their mind to drop Quinton de Kock. But I think it's a really valid question for sure.
One more reason I say this is because I want KL Rahul to be keeping, because he will be keeping for India as well, most likely in the WTC final and definitely in the 50 over World Cup later in the year.
One thing they don't lack is keeping options.
Yeah. Yeah, Gurkirat, maybe I think you're on mute.
There's Nicholas Puran as well who can keep.
Yeah.
But I would, while I agree with maybe dropping Quinton de Kock, uh, instead of adding Naveen ul Haq and opening with Krunal Pandya, what I'd probably do is I'll open with someone like a Manan Vora and have Daniel Sams in the 11, because Daniel Sams then allows me more strength in the batting. He's someone who can really hit it well against space bowling. So he adds value with the bat at number 7, and then or maybe even number 6, depending upon how you shape up the batting order.
But does he really
And
solve the dead bowling issues? Because Daniel Sam's bowling is blow hot, blow cold, big time.
no, he doesn't. He doesn't. That is something that I agree with. But I think he brings in decent value with the new ball, and being a left armer, that uh, you may be able to cover up with the loss at the death anyway, if you get enough wickets. If you have the opposition 5 down by the end of the 16th over, or you are able to hit them early in the power play itself, then I think those 4 overs at the death don't become as important as what they could be. So there's that thought that I have. But because I feel sometimes it is just very difficult to sort of minimize the damage that can happen at the death. Sometimes batters are in such a good touch, and the conditions are such that regardless of how well you bowl, you would end up conceding 45 runs in the last 4 overs anyway. So there's also that problem. So I'd rather have someone who can give me some hits lower down the order. And Daniel Sams is not someone who's a hit and a miss kind of a number 7 or a number 6. He's very decent as a number 7. So I'd probably do that rather than bring in Naveen ul Haq. Anyway,
Cool. Yeah.
The next question before we move on to the next team is, do you guys see them as potential top fours?
I
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. My gut feeling is they're winning this. It's just my gut feel. Don't ask don't ask me why. I've been having this gut feel for a while. Let's see. But definitely I'll be surprised if they do not end up in the top four.
For me, there's questions to answer, but I think I look at this and I think that they look better equipped than some other teams. So yeah, I would give them a pretty solid chance of qualification, and then we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, same here. I feel that they'll make the top four because they have enough quality and they have enough holes plugged in the 11 than many other teams. So it shouldn't really be a problem for them to finish in the top four. I think what they should be really aiming at is a top two finish because they have that quality to do that. Anyway, so moving on to the next team, as there is consensus amongst the all three of us is that strike rates are not overrated, and neither is the quality in the Lucknow squad. And all three of us do see them finishing in the top four. Somesh's gut says that they might even go on to win the tournament. If that happens, it would be quite something because both the two new teams in the first two seasons would have won a title each, and the fans of Bangalore, Delhi, and Punjab would have a lot more to be sad about. But anyway, talking about one of those teams, and the next team is amongst them is Delhi, who have had their fair share of being close, but yet so far in the tournament. You look at the 2009 season, you look at the 2012 season, you look at the 2019, 2020, and 2021 season. 2020 they were in the finals. 2021 they finished the league at the top of the table but barely couldn't reach the finals. So they've had their hits and misses, and last season as well they were just one game away from reaching the playoffs. Some might even say that they were probably one DRS referral away, but let's not go there because it's something which is going to touch a nerve or two amongst the Delhi fans. But anyway, to coming to both of you on a serious note, how big of an impact is Rishabh Pant's injury, and do you think this side looks better than last time, or do you think they're probably weaker than last time?
For me, the impact is huge for a number of reasons. Firstly, is the fact that he's kind of I look at him as the heartbeat of this team. Someone who, even at a young age, obviously has been captain and is a precocious talent, and someone who I have high expectations for as a player. I just it's just such a shame that he's going to be missing this tournament. The other issues is that they were low on keeping options prior to to anything happening, and the implications of that is that if you play Phil Salt as an overseas keeper, then you're looking at a very very right-hander heavy top six. Whereas if you play, I think they've been trying to upskill Sarfraz Khan and Manish Pandey to be potential keeping options. Then if one of them is at least somewhat competent behind the stumps, you might want to play Riley Rousseau as another left-hander. So there's a lot to debate in terms of what he brings with the bat, but also with the gloves and how that balances the team up with the left-right combos and stuff as well. So it's no doubt a big miss.
So I think to answer that Pant question, had he been in the side, he would have been my one player that they could not afford to lose, because this is essentially a team of top order batters, and he, like Dan said, not only is a proper middle order player, although we all want him to bat in the top order anyway, but he's taken up that difficult job of batting in the middle order. Lefty, highly experienced, highly talented, is a wicket keeper as well. So I mean, losing him is massive. Yeah, and I mean, those of you watching, we've actually done a piece wherein we have analyzed that what Pant's unavailability means for Delhi, and there are 7 different scenarios and how they can plug the gap, and none of them are perfect. So this is the size of the gap he leaves.
I do feel that, no, although there is no player, or there is no no way, like you mentioned in that, in that article that has been done, that there are seven different combinations and you don't still fill up the gap left by, someone like Rishabh Pant. I do feel that Delhi could have prepared better in the auctions, because this is not the first time that they've lost Pant to injury. In the 2020 tournament, when Pant was injured, they had to play Alex Carey, which meant that even Shimron Hetmeyer had to be dropped. Now there is no out and out Indian wicketkeeper either. The possibility is that someone like Sarfaraz Khan keeps, and then you structure the team around him. But it is also not ideal, because he's not not a wicketkeeper either. He's not a full time wicketkeeper either. So I do think that they could have prepared a little better at the auctions. I also think that having nine players who can bat in the top three, uh, out of which four of them are overseas, which is half of your overseas quota, is something that you really can't be doing. Because I looked at it. There's Warner, there's Marsh, there's Phil Salt, and there's Rasu. All of them are essentially top three players. And to add on to it, there's Prithvi Shaw, there's Yash Dhul, there is Sarfraz, there is Pant, so there's Manish Pandey. Nine players who were in the top three. So there's obviously a huge issue I see in the middle order. And I think the only way Delhi can fill up those gaps is probably, have Marsh and Powell bat at 5 and 6, or maybe if I don't see Marsh being dropped, and I don't see Powell being dropped either. Have Marsh and Powell bat at 5 and 6. Have maybe Sarfaraz at 4, and then maybe a Yash Dhul at 3, or maybe a Manish Pandey at 3, to try and elongate the batting lineup. Because if Marsh and Powell are at 5 and 6, then Akshar Patel is at number 7, unless you bat Akshar Patel at 6, which means Marsh is at 3, 4 is Sarfraz Khan, and 5 is Powell. Then at 7 you are left with again Lalit Yadav, Ripal Patel, Aman Khan. Your batting again finishes at number 6, and it has been a feature of Delhi over the last 4 seasons, and we saw that even in the women's tournament, the batting was ending at number 6. So how they plug this gap of batting in the middle order is going to be very essential and very very deterministic of how far they go in the tournament, as far as I'm concerned.
Hmm. I knew whenever we'll talk about Delhi, it'll be all we'll need is one monologue from Gurkirat. But I think Gurkirat, based on your 11, Dan does not agree because he has Salt in his 11. Maybe we can have the graphic of Dan's Delhi 11, and Dan can explain what he thinks.
I mean, it's not perfect at all by any way, in any way, shape, or form. Look, I've got no idea. So just to clarify on the graphic, it would be Salt as the keeper, not Sarfraz. Um, so that's the thing. I've got him as the only real kind of noted keeper. That means that you have to make a decision between Robin Powell and Mitchell Marsh, because I think the Warner obviously is captain, and Norkia as the leader of the pace attack kind of pick themselves as the other two overseas choices. So there's a lot of combos that have now really been make it a lot more difficult to pick, say, a Marsh and a Powell in the same team. Now that Pant's injury has that kind of impact on those type of combos, and as Gurkirat mentioned as well, the batting stops pretty quickly, and there's not really a great deal of options to change that. And I think what we have to also remember is that in this team, Manish Pandey has now had a number of pretty mediocre seasons in this tournament. And Sarfraz Khan, if he does keep, which I think looks likely based on sort of the messaging coming out of into the media, is that he only played 6 games last season. He's never really had a full tournament where he's been a regular and played really, really well. So that's a big challenge for him and for Delhi, I think, to kind of integrate, and then that integrate those two players into their group, which they kind of I feel like they have to do now because of the injury to Pant.
So two questions that immediately strike my mind when I see this graphic, and maybe we can just take this graphic out. of the screen now. Number one is, let's forget about the keeping for a bit. Let's assume that Sarfaraz can be pretty handy with the key with the gloves and won't impact Delhi side in a negative manner. As a pure batter, who would you rather pick, Salt or Mitchell Marsh?
They play completely different roles. Salt, more of a top order batter who with high intent. Marsh can bat sort of. You primarily want Mitchell Marsh to face pace, but I would look at him as a sort of more of a competition with Rovman Powell in that respect, rather than a competition with Phil. So the question for Mitchell Marsh's utility greatly grows if he's able to bowl decent amount of overs. Physically, that's not always been the case with him, and I think that devalues his quality or usefulness, I should say, in T20 teams. And this is the other problem as well, is that in that 11 that I suggested, and I don't think that there's many combos which really change this, is that there are really only 5 bowlers. Because I don't see Rovman Powell as even an occasional bowler at this level. I just don't see it. So where is their 6th bowler? And even if they play Marsh, maybe he's not fit to bowl much. So it doesn't really change a lot there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying, that unless if they need a 6th bowler in the 11, they'll either have to use the impact player, or they play one of Ripal Patel, Lalit Yadav, or Aman Khan, who I at this point of time, who I don't think either solve your bowling problem or solve your batting problem. So that's a issue with them. And what you mentioned about Phil Salt keeping, I don't see Ponting keeping Marsh out, especially not after how Marsh batted in that series versus India. And yeah, I don't see that happening. I see that Marsh will be playing, and what Delhi will probably try and do is maybe use a Vicky Oswal or a Praveen Dubey, or one of the Indian left armers that they have, or one of the Indian paces, because they have Ishant, they have Mukesh, they have Chetan Sakaria who's there. So maybe they use one of those bowlers to strengthen the bowling lineup, probably when they're bowling second. But yeah, the problem is that there isn't a lot of flexibility that the Delhi 11 can have, because they don't have a lot of options, and their impact player options are not going to solve their batting as well. I mean, they don't have good enough batters to bat at number 7. And the only good thing for them is that Akshar Patel has really become a very good batter from last season, and in that last 1 year. So maybe he can be someone who's used as a floater to come in at number 4 and hit left arm spin and leg spin. I suppose that might happen, because otherwise it's just or because if they don't play Riley Russell, there's only Warner at the top who's a left-hander, or Akshar Patel at 6 or 7 who's a left-hander. So there are obvious issues with this lineup.
So, which brings me to my second question. Now, Delhi were the side with the best run rate last season, and they were essentially bashing pace left, right, and center, which is pretty obvious in a team of Warner, Shaw, and Mitchell Marsh. Now, Dan, you have Manish Pandey at number 4. There is an option of them actually promoting Akshar to counter spin and maybe have Manish Pandey as an impact player to arrest a collapse in the top order if needed. Because what we've seen of Manish Pandey over the years is that he's better utilized as an opener or max 3. 4 is a little too down for him. So don't you think that's a better approach, and then maybe they can have a Lalit Yadav as an off spinner in the team to as one more matchup bowler?
That would give them some form of bowling options in terms of the 6th bowler, but when Lalit Yadav last season struck at 110, I don't see him really as a hitter. Just generally, as not just from last season's numbers, but just on a more general basis as well. So if you're batting Akshar Patel at number 4, and then you'd have like maybe Sarfraz at 5, Marsh at 6 or something like that, and then Lalit at 7, it still doesn't look great to me. And yeah, maybe you're manufacturing a little bit more bowling options into your team, but for me, I think it creates as many problems as it solves.
Well, on the flip side, Delhi are one side who might have only 5 bowling options, but they're very top options, right? I mean, there are hardly any gaps. I mean, they just tend to cover all facets of the game. You have
Yeah.
Enric Nokia, who's high pace. Khalil had an excellent last season.
Mhm.
Plus, he's the left-hander, change of pace. Kuldeep has been on an upward curve in his career. Akshar Patel might not have picked as many wickets as Delhi would have liked, but then we all know his potential. And there is Chetan Sakaria, who is pretty decent with the new ball. So at least from folks who support Delhi Capitals, they can take heart from the fact that unlike a lot of other teams, there is a very solid core of bowling.
Yeah, but it's also a lot to ask for 5 bowlers to play 14 matches in a row all together as the same unit. That's the other thing. I mean, where's the backup? Yeah, you're looking at domestically. You're looking at sort of Mukesh Kumar or Kamesh Nagakoti as a domestic pace backup. Vicky Oswald did well in side Mushtaq. Maybe he can come in and if there was an injury to somebody, but again, that creates more problems. Say he came in for Akshar Patel was injured. That's more problems as well with the batting. So yeah, if they can stay fit, that will be the key.
Who's the one player who you think who you think is extremely important for them in this season, without which that whatever little chance that they have of making the top 4 goes for a toss?
I mean, I could think of 5 players probably that I would say that for, and I think that's the critical thing with this team. They're going to need 4 or 5 players to really step up and cover a lot of gaps. I look at Akshar Patel as the indispensable player in this team. Improved the batting, as I think we mentioned earlier, and obviously a frontline bowler as well. Without him, the balance of this team is a big problem, huge problem, and I just think that he's kind of like the linchpin which you can build this team around.
Do you think he could have been the captain in place of David Warner, maybe, given how Warner's towards the end of his career has not had the kind of run you would want, and an overseas player being a captain is a risk that we have discussed earlier as well. So do you think that Akshar Patel as a captain should have been a possibility that Delhi could have looked at?
Yeah, I do, because I'm not a massive fan of the Warner captaincy pick. One, we've already spoken about in previous shows about the risks that you're taking with an overseas captain. Also, we've seen recently Warner has been injured in Test cricket. He's been struggling a lot in over the last 6 months or so, and he's 36. You don't tend to get any better at the age of 36. And what I worry about a little bit here is almost a similar situation to what we saw with Owen Morgan in 2021 at Kolkata. Is you kind of like picking a player because they're captain rather than there's a worry that you're picking them as captain rather than because they're scoring enough runs. And if Warner starts the season in slow fashion, they kind of have to stick with him, and that's tricky. And especially as they've got no other real top order left-handers or so who I don't think any of us really expect to play that at least from the start. That's tough too.
Yeah, I just think that if they'd not made Warner captain, then the possibility of giving games to someone like a Rosso or a Salt were a lot more than what they are right now.
Yeah,
Somesh, who do you think is the one player which is indispensable to their squad right now?
I agree with Dan. I mean, Akshar Patel was my pick as well. It's fairly obvious. He balances the team. If not for him, the batting lineup would end at 5, not even 6. Plus, I mean, like I said, he's not maybe picking as many wickets as the team would have wanted in the middle overs, but at least there is potential. And I mean, I see Akshar as not an all-phase bowler, but he's someone who can, on assisting wickets and against a team like, say, Bangalore, he can even bowl in the power play. So
He
a
did.
highly utility player. Yeah.
In one of the games, he actually bowled in the super over in 2021 in Chennai.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And he did quite well. So
Hmm.
I think Akshar's the obvious answer. But going back to the first statement that Dan gave, that there are 4 or 5 players who could be very crucial because there's an obvious lack of balance in the 11 given the options. I think if Delhi need to have a chance to make it to the last four, they'll need someone like Mitch Marsh to score 500 runs and last the season. Because at this point of time, I don't think Delhi have uh, enough enough ammunition in the lower batting order at 5, 6, 7 to make up, or probably to score 50, 60 runs in the last 5 overs. So what they'd essentially need is always maybe one of Warner or Mitch Marsh to be batting till that point and then explode. Uh, I do feel that given the form that Mitchell Marsh is in, he's more likely to be that player rather than David Warner. So I, I think someone like Mitch Marsh needs to have a season of 500 runs or so for Delhi to qualify for the last four. Do you guys see them qualifying for the last four?
From my perspective, I think they've got a chance. I think it would be a lot easier to see them route to top four with a fully fit Rishabh Pant, obviously. But I look at them and I think they're not the worst team by any stretch of the imagination. I look at them as a potential top 6 team. I think that there's a number of teams who you would say could come anywhere between sort of 3rd and 6th, and I think that I would put Delhi in that bracket.
I think for me as well, they're not the obvious top 4 pick, but I think they're not as bad as a few of you Delhi fans make everyone believe that they are. Specifically on the bowling front, I mean, having a very good, solid 5 bowling options is a very is an advantage. We've spoken about Rajasthan, we've spoken about Lucknow, we've spoken about Hyderabad, and we have said that maybe bowling is a department where there are a few gaps which I don't see with Delhi. So that's a big plus. A lot will depend on Warner because, I mean, Warner, the captain, uh, is a different beast. Though obviously not in a very politically correct sense of way at times, but I am a fan of the ruthlessness that he brings to the table. Plus, we've seen in the past, and there is no data that can gauge this, but adversity sort of bring teams close sometimes. I know the same case can be made about Kolkata, but they have far too many gaps for even the adversity to bring them together. But with Delhi, maybe you never know. I mean, they can, if not qualify, maybe just be a win away from qualifying, which probably be a little more heartbreaking for someone like Gurkirat, who wants them to have a really bad season so that there can be a change in management.
I think the one thing that you can say about them is if those 5 bowlers stay fit, they've got the opportunity to at least be a bowling strong team, and bowling strong teams tend not to do that badly in T20 leagues.
Yep, Gurkirat, I think you're on mute.
I suppose they can reach the playoffs on the basis of great individual performance.
Yep, I think so.
No, I wasn't on mute. My net went away. I was saying on the basis of a few individual performances, they can probably make it to the last four because even though there are gaps, uh,
Okay.
can
Meanwhile,
you guys hear me?
we can, but I think your internet is a little intermittent. Meanwhile, we can take a few questions and maybe wrap up with Gurkirat's thoughts on Delhi. So, Sean, if you're there, we can maybe start taking a few
Can,
questions.
can you
Yep.
guys hear me now? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So there is this question by Neural Hacks with Vasant. He's going on to say that KL Rahul had a decent strike rate of 136 last season, scored 616 runs. So why do we feel that a 500 run season at 140, 142? I'll just give my few initial thoughts on that. Even though he ended up with a strike rate of 136, his strike rate in the power play was 103, which is unacceptable, if I can use that term, because that is something similar that what he did for India as well in the T20 World Cup. And if if you're not going to make use of the fielding restrictions, then there's no point opening. Although he had a strike rate of around 200 in the death, but that doesn't really make up for the loss of deliveries up front. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It's just a waste of resources earlier on in the innings.
Yep, I think there are a few questions on Lucknow's impact players. We've already uh, sort of discussed that. So maybe ACB, you can go and check the earlier part of the video.
But there's this one question which is actually a good question to be taken. It's about, do you think that the average totals will be higher this year than the previous years? Uh, I don't think so. I don't think it would be higher than last season, because last year I think the tournament happened on probably the four best batting pitches, or the four best combination of batting pitches that it could have had. This year, with the tournament being played in Chennai, and teams traveling, I think uh, boundary sizes are also bigger. Hyderabad is a bigger ground. Mohali is a bigger ground. I don't see batting scores being higher than before. And with the impact player coming in, I also think bowling will be stronger for most teams than before. So I don't see the scores being bigger than the last time. I think if the average score last time around was 175, this season it might be 165.
Hmm. Yep, there's a good question by ACB on Stoinis. He says that is there potential to use Stoinis as an impact player? So his thought is maybe when they're batting first, don't have Stoinis in the 11, start with only three overseas, and if need be, if they don't start well, and if either of Rahul or Ticock are not there till the end, then only bring Stoinis into the 11. What do you think, that Dan? Is it too much of a risk?
Yeah, I think so. Also, I mean, we've spoken about the impact player a lot in previous shows, and I genuinely think that I would be extremely shocked for a team not to start with the four overseas. I think I've seen some chats on Twitter about teams trying to get very imaginative in that respect, but I think it's a risk. Personally, it's not something that I see. I look at Stoinis is providing obviously some form of a bowling option as well as a batting option. So, no, it's not something I would envisage anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, Dhir Kotari has a question on Mukesh Kumar. He says that Mukesh Kumar was selected for the India squad. So, is there a potential that he might play ahead of Sakaria?
Well, that could possibly be the case. Obviously, I spent a lot of money on Mukesh Kumar, but when he's played in Mushtaq for Bengal, his numbers are like nothing special, and obviously he's 29 years old now and never played in the IPL, so that's a huge step up. Um, uh, I personally quite rate Zakaria actually, and would like to see him have good game time to develop into a strong bowling option.
And Mukesh Kumar was selected for the India's red ball squad, if I'm not mistaken. So, again, different uh, formats. Yeah, Gurkirat.
He was selected in white ball as well. I think he was selected for Sri Lanka ODIs, but I believe the combination is going to be somewhat like Nokia playing for short, then one left arm Indian pacer, and then one right arm Indian pacer.
Mm.
At this point of time, Khalil is easily ahead in the pecking order, ahead of Sakaria, I believe. So Khalil will play, and then when it comes to choosing who the right arm pacer could be, you'll have one of three to choose between: Mukesh, Ishant, and Nagarkoti. Depending upon what roles do they see, they'll probably make that call. If they want, if there are conditions where the ball can swing, and they believe that Ishant is bowling decently, I won't be surprised if Ishant Sharma also plays ahead of Mukesh or Kamlesh Nagarkoti, because he also brings in the experience. He's played with the franchise for 3 seasons before, 2019 to 2021. And in 2019, in the absence of Rabada, he had done okay as a death bowler, even though he was not bowling a lot at the death. But that one odd over that he was bowling, he was not getting smashed for runs. So I believe that is also one possibility that might happen.
Yep. Do you also feel they might rest Nokia in certain games and then try Mustafizur or Ngidi, especially if they're playing in Chennai or venues where maybe bowlers more equipped with a slower ball will be more effective?
It could easily happen, yeah. But the attractiveness of picking Norkia if he's fit is going to be, I think, tough to turn down. But yes, certainly. The one thing they don't lack is quality backup paces from the overseas market. I mean,
Hmm. Jayesh Khemka is asking thoughts on having Yashdul at 3 and then Marsh or Russo at 4.
um, I've got no major issue with that. Funny enough, because when there's a line call between two players, I'm quite minded to go with the younger option. You're giving them game time to develop and improve, and the retention rights on young players are just far more valuable than they are on someone like Manish Pandey, who's kind of switched around franchises a bit in recent years and
Yeah.
hasn't done particularly well. So yeah, you could easily do that if you wanted to take a risk and back the young Ashtul. That's certainly a combination that you could consider.
I have a question which is an extension of this. Let's assume that Powell is playing, Warner is playing, and Nokia is playing. Now, if they have Dul at 3, who would you rather have at 4? Is it Marsh or Russo? I mean, who do you think provides a better value?
If you're looking purely as a batter, I
Yeah.
would pick Wally Russo for two reasons. One, he has a higher strike rate ceiling. Two, left-hander.
Yeah. I tend to agree. If Sarfaraz can keep and play at 4, having Russo at 4 and Powell at 6, that actually looks not a bad batting lineup. I mean,
It's not a
you have
disaster.
Warner, Shaw,
See
lot of positives there.
what Delhi has to figure out is that at number 3, like, who's that batter in the middle order who can take the role of batching spin? That is very important. If they
Yeah, I mean,
think that Russo can do that role, then might as well play him with while asking Sarfaraz to keep the gloves. But if they think that Russo's not good enough, then promoting Akshar Patel to hit spin is not the worst idea either. Which is why I
yeah.
said that they can also look at a possibility of Akshar at 4, uh, Akshar at 4, Marsh at 5, and Powell at 6
Yeah.
with
But
maybe
is Marsh
Sarfaraz
at
at
5 a very viable option? Because he's not been doing that lately. Although we can see Delhi combination is a topic in itself, and we can take an hour just discussing that. I mean, maybe having Rosso at 4, asking him to go and bash spin, and if he dismiss, then might as well send Akshar at to follow that. You go out and continue doing the same what Rosso was doing. Might not be a bad option in itself. Uh,
The
yeah.
problem with Russo is that he's very high variance. Like, he's
Mm,
had such a run where he'll score 100 or he'll score a 50 plus score and then follow it up with two scores of basically nothing, and then
Hmm.
another score of significance with a 40, 50, 60, and then nothing. So very difficult, it becomes very difficult to then plan your remaining combination around a player like this. You expect this with fast bowlers, especially express fast bowlers, but you can't have a number 4 like that, I suppose.
So, last two questions. One is from Vasant, is essentially about captaincy and KL's captaincy in particular. That though Lucknow did not have the best bowling lineup, but they defended 7 of 8 matches. So, do you
mm.
think I mean, it can be attributed to KL's captaincy or overall planning and even the individuals who were bowling during those times?
Okay, so from my perspective, this is probably a fairly controversial take, but I'm not a massive believer in players who consistently can provide clutch moments, and I think what we saw with both new teams, but even more so with Gujarat, was that they won so many fine margin, high variance moments in matches, and I don't think that that's sustainable.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm certainly very reticent to attribute that to some form of captaincy genius or anything like that. A lot of the time, it is just say fine margins, high variance spots, and someone's got to win them.
Okay. Yeah, some people might also attribute to coaches who just advise players to eat well and rest. Uh, yeah. So the last question of the day, and it's a very good question in my opinion. Cool Kid 1234 is asking, if you're playing on a spin heavy ground like Kotla, should you go for the best spinner in the auction, or do you recognize that you can just skip that department and do not think about it much, because every spinner will be good on that ground.
I like the idea of still picking a really good spinner, because then you're really putting a stranglehold on your position. And if you can say, look to bowl 12 overs of spin in a in an innings, then and you've got, say, an absolute world class spinner like a Rashid Khan or someone like that, then and two pretty competent spinners, particularly if you can get all three types of main spinners into your 11, I think that's massive. And if you look at how Chennai, their blueprint at Chepauk was to bowl more spin than the opposition. So consistently, they were bowling a higher percentage of spin overs than the opposition teams. And one that really surprised me, because you would think that the opposition teams would have kind of worked that one out by now. But two, it clearly was a coherent game plan from Chennai to do so and exploit the slow conditions at Chepauk, and they've obviously done that very well in the past.
Yep, I think Cool Kid is asking this question in light of the recent, Border Gavaskar Trophy, where Matt Kuhneman essentially was
but
as good as Akshar Patel due to the wickets.
but I don't think now I don't think that now Kotla is a spin heavy track. It sometimes tends to stay slow, but it's not really a spin heavy track. And the problem with playing at the Kotla is sometimes because of the short boundaries, you can't really rely on spinners too much. You still need to have a well-rounded attack, because boundaries are very short at Kotla. The square boundaries are, I think, sometimes 55 meters. So that's another issue at Kotla. But this question that was asked, I believe it is more suitable for a venue like Chennai, where the boundaries are also bigger.
Maybe even Lucknow, if they spread out the same wicket that they did when India played New Zealand. Okay, guys, to wrap up, this has been an excellent chat. I think we covered whatever we could. Of course, I mean, these are the topics that we can go on and on with, but it was great having you, Dan, and of course, Gurkirat, our very own
And
Gurkirat.
apologies once again for turning up
Yeah,
late.
we
Hopefully,
promise we will tune in at dot 7 p.m. tomorrow to discuss two teams. One of them is Mumbai. Who's the other? Yeah, one of them is Mumbai. So maybe Mumbai fans can turn up. Other is, of course, Kolkata. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting how even how Mumbai has been Kolkata's nemesis, and we have paired those two teams together in this preview as well.
Of course, two teams with their key players out injured, and let's not go to shaming NCA for a moment. But thanks having you guys, and whoever who watched this video, please share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel. Just we need more subscriptions, and so that you could see more of the shows that I'm assuming you don't get to see on other platforms.
We've already put out separate clips of Rajasthan's preview and Bangalore's preview. So if you just want to watch the previews of your favorite teams, you can do that as well. We assure you that they will be out separately as well, apart from this episode as a whole, so that you can just focus on your team and not look at the whole conversation. So there's that option as well. On that note, I'd like to thank everyone who's tuned in to watch this and send in their questions. It's something that we always enjoy, and it's one of the major reasons why we wanted to do this show live. So thank you so much. And there are two more episodes to go in this section, and from Friday the tournament anyway begins, wherein we will be having a lot of watch alongs, which are not just about cricket. It's some banter, it's some masti, it's some false accusation which my colleague Avnish keeps making on me. So please, you tune in for all kinds of masala on cricket and otherwise, and just enjoy. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. Goodbye from all of us over here. See you tomorrow at 7 p.m. once again. Bye bye.